I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Here on another beautiful Monday, and I put out a request for you guys to send in t-shirts, and we actually got quite a few submissions, so I thank you. The one I'm wearing today is from Wayne Anderson, and I do all my own stunts, mainly because we can't hire a stunt person. We just don't have the budget. So thank you very much, Wayne, for sending in a shirt, keeping my ugly chest covered, and giving us something to look at here on the show. If you want to send in a shirt, please go ahead and send it to 8541 Tactical. It's P.O. Box 324, Evansville, Indiana, 47702. And we'll leave that address down below in the descriptions. Now, on to the questions. Andrew asks, replacing factory triggers with aftermarket triggers. Well, my first recommendation is, if it's not broke, don't fix it. If there's nothing wrong with your current trigger, do not replace it. If you have a trigger that maybe is a little bit heavier than you like, maybe has a little creep or something, take it to a rifle smith and see if they can adjust it out and set it at a safe pull weight for you that has no creep or over travel. Now, in the case of the Remington 700, there are a ton of trigger options available out there. So it's a lot of times it's kind of like guys do it just to upgrade their rifle, and that's fine. Sometimes we like to just throw money at things without any real outcome. One of the reasons that I can see to upgrade the trigger on the Remington 700 is on the current X-Mark triggers. While the X-Mark triggers that are coming out right now have a very nice crisp break on them. They really have no over travel or take up, but their pull weight can be kind of high. You can adjust the pull weight down, but you can't do anything about the fact that it's a really narrow, slick trigger face. So I prefer a wider, grooved or textured trigger face just to keep my trigger finger planted in hot, sweaty situations. So that would be a good reason to upgrade the trigger. For me, on Remington 700s, I think the Timney 510 is an excellent upgrade. It gives you a very crisp break. They come set from the factory at about 3.5 pounds, which is a great pull weight for a tactical rifle. They have no detectable take-up or over-travel, no creep, none of that nastiness. So they're a great option. I hear jewel triggers tossed around a lot for Remington 700s. I would stay away from the jewel if you're going to work in a nasty environment. If you've got blowing dust, mud, anything like that to deal with. Jewel triggers are great triggers, but they like to be kept clean. So unless you intend to be dousing it with lighter fluid every time you go to the range, you know, probably not a great choice. For you Savage shooters out there, I'm sorry, I'm not as acquainted with Savage trigger options as I really should be. If some of you guys have some recommendations for Savage triggers, go ahead and drop them in the comment section so your fellow shooters can see what you think about trigger options for Savages. Same thing for the Winchester Model 70 and the FN rifles, the FN variant of the Model 70. Go ahead and drop some comments down below and see what triggers you guys recommend for them. Darren asks, any tips on learning to call your shots? Well, the best thing for learning to call your shots is to work on your follow-through. Calling your shots is nothing more than seeing where the last position the sights were on the target when that shot broke. In order to do that, you need to make sure that you keep everything exactly the same through the recoil of the rifle. The best way to call your shots, to learn to call your shots, is to do it on single shot drills where you're not worried about running the bolt, you're not worried about getting on the next target. All you want to do is keep those crosshairs planted on the target. When the rifle recoils, you want your brain to record that last sight picture, the last thing you saw before the reticle jumped off the target. That is how you determine your follow-through, because you're going to plot your shot the last point you saw those crosshairs. Don't get in the habit of trying to see where the shot hole is afterwards. In fact, you really don't want to see where the shot hole is until you've plotted your shot. If you try to look down range and you see where the shot hole is, you'll start cheating yourself on the call. You really want to see where the reticle was, plot where the reticle was in your data book, then go back and look where the shot hole is and plot that. Now, if you find that you're not able to see the reticle or the iron sights when the rifle recoils, then you may have a flinch. You may inadvertently be closing your eyes before that rifle fires. If that's the case, then go recruit a friend, do what are called some ball and dummy drills. That's where you take live rounds and spent cases or dummy rounds, and your friend will throw one or the other in your chamber, and you won't know which. You won't know if it's going to be a live round or if it's going to be a dummy round. Mix that in with some dry firing and some .22 practice, and that can help you get rid of any flinching that you're having. Elliot asks, AR10 versus M1A. Well, the AR10 is really going to be your best bet over the M1A for the precision rifle competition game. The reason being, the M1A, while it is an incredibly iconic battle rifle, was not really intended to have a magnified optic placed on top. So you really have to do some different things with some different mounts to get a magnified optic placed over the center line of the rifle. In addition, the receiver doesn't really lend itself to bedding as well as, for instance, bolt action rifles do, and the receiver needs to be bedded to get the most out of the factory wood stocks or the fiberglass stocks for the M1A. Your alternate option on the M1A is to go to a full chassis system, which alleviates some of the scope mounting issues as well as the bedding issues. But now, once you've gone to that, take a look at the price of a M1A with a matched barrel versus the price of an AR10 or a MA10 build or an LR308, and you'll see you're really not saving any money, and you still have the gas system to worry about. I am not an M1A gunsmith, so I can't tell you what all is involved in tuning the gas system, but I do have friends that do it, and sometimes it's a little fiddly to get those dialed in. So my recommendation would be, if it's a tactical match rifle or a precision rifle, stick with the large frame AR platforms versus the M1A. If it's just a rifle that you're going to go out and bang some steel with or have some fun with, and you like the M1A for nostalgic purposes, that's perfectly okay. I intend to add an M1A here shortly to my inventory. They are great rifles, but if you're going to be shooting with money on the line, large frame AR is going to get done in a whole lot better manner than trying to make an M1A work for that situation. VJ asks, might be hard to do in the studio, but different techniques when shooting with a sling. Well, VJ, you're right. It is going to be really difficult for us to do here in the studio, so we're putting that off until the weather breaks this spring and we can get out and get some range time and actually do some video on the range of some different sling techniques. Also, your second question here, I see you asked for some precision sling recommendations. Well, we're going to roll that into the sling video as well, and we'll try to get you some use on that. Right now, the weather's kind of iffy here. It likes to switch between raining and snowing back and forth, and while I still shoot in it, I don't like to drag the cameras and the audio gear out in it because really we don't have the ability to replace it should we destroy it with weather. So hopefully we'll be able to get on that and you'll have that to look forward to. John asks, what causes split cases? Well, split cases, very simply, what happens is they lose their elasticity. Brass, we use brass for cartridge cases because it has the ability to stretch and seal up the chamber when you fire the cartridge. That stretching and relaxing over time work hardens the brass, and it's no longer able to stretch and then return to its previous condition. It doesn't have the elasticity to stretch as fast as it can or it needs to seal the chamber, and so you'll have the neck split on it. Generally, split necks is an indicator that that brass has exceeded its working life and you need to chuck it. There are various opinions on split brass, but what I like to do when I reload in lots of 50 or lots of 100. If I get a couple of split cases in a lot, I will recycle that entire lot of brass. It'll be taken out of service and no longer used. Try to be careful with leaving that stuff out on the range because there are people that will go out and scrounge brass on the range, and I don't want to be responsible for somebody else or contributing to somebody else harming themselves. So I would make sure you take that stuff and smash it and recycle it. That way it can't be reused. Now there are guys that will continue to use a lot of brass and just throw out the pieces that split and continue to shoot it as it splits. I prefer not to. I just don't want to risk any harm to the rifle or harm to myself by a catastrophic case failure. Now splitting case necks is not a catastrophic failure, but now that we're seeing that brass has lost its elasticity, you start to lead up to stuff where you could possibly have case head separation or something that is more catastrophic. So I prefer not to risk it. Just dump it. Now, as you're reloading, annealing can help you with case splitting. It can help ward it off for a little bit longer, but eventually you're just going to get to that point where those necks no longer can hold the pressure and they're going to split. I don't have a whole lot of experience with annealing cases. We'll get into that a little bit later on this year because I'm going to have to get into it for some of the other stuff I'm doing. So look forward to that. Steven asks, when will your online store reopen? Well, Stephen, we ran into some problems with that, just some time conflicts, and it really has absorbed way more time than I really would like it to. So we're trying to look into some outsourcing means, some contract sewing and whatnot to get the store back up. Because of the issues with doing that, legal and just logistical and otherwise, it's going to be a little while before we get it back up. I'm hoping to get it late summer, but we'll see how things go. But thank you for your interest. Those of you that still have orders in with us, we are filling the orders that we currently have on deck. We're getting those out as quickly as we can. So thank you for your patience. Ethan asks, what's the maximum effective range of a 223 with a 1 9" twist? Well, Ethan, max effective range for our purposes, not military purposes, is going to be dependent upon what you intend to do with it. The military is really only worried about killing combatants or injuring combatants so they're no longer able to function. So that's what they base their max effective range on. What we're worried about is we're worried about delivering the energy on the target that we need to get the job done. If it's a paper target, it's going to be considerably less energy than if it's a steel plate. If it's a steel plate, at the least you're going to need to hit it hard enough to hear that ring back at your firing position or slightly move the plate. At most, you may need to knock down a reactive steel target. So the energy that you need to apply to the target is going to determine what your max effective range is. Your best friend for determining the max effective range is something like the JBM Ballistics calculator. If you go to JBM Ballistics, and we'll leave the link down below, you can look up what your max or your energy is going to be at each range to then determine your max effective range. Robert asks, what's your opinion on the 6.5 Grendel? Also, any chance of some offhand shooting clips? Well, Robert, we talked about the offhand shooting clips and the Sling video that we'll get to a little bit later on this spring. As far as my opinion on the 6.5 Grendel, I looked at it, I evaluated it, and I have not built one at this point just because I have large frame ARs, and anything I figured that I would want to do with a 6.5 Grendel, I can do better with a 260 Remington or 6.5 Creedmoor in the large frame ARs. Anytime I've been at a high level competition and seen a 6.5 Grendel, they've usually had some kind of mechanical issues. And this is generally comes down to them pushing the cartridge to its maximum pressure levels in order to get the velocity out of the heavy 6.5s that they want. And so again, it comes back to just you can get more velocity at lower pressures with the larger frame ARs shooting that same 6.5 bullet. So that's my opinion on the Grendel. I may build one at some point in time, but I don't currently have a need that the Grendel will fill that a large frame AR wouldn't fill better. Scott asks, if my current factory barrel is a sub-MOA shooter with a low round count, will I see any benefits going custom, or do I save my money and shoot out my current barrel? Well, Scott, it's mainly going to depend on what you're doing with that rifle and what you mean by sub-MOA. If by sub-MOA you mean it's shooting 5 shots into 9/10 of an inch at 100 yards, then for most intents and purposes, I would rebarrel that rifle, because to me that's not an acceptable level of accuracy for most of what I do. If you're just going out and you're plinking steel at ranges of 1,000 yards and in, or even 800 yards and in, then a 1 MOA barrel is going to do fine. Shoot it until you burn it out, and then replace it as your budget and time allows. Because remember, you're going to be without that rifle for a little while you have it rebarreled. If by sub MOA you mean it's shooting half-inch groups for 5 shots at 100 yards, I wouldn't bother with it. I'd shoot the current barrel out and then replace it later on down the line. By the time you decide to replace it, you may have also decided to switch to a different caliber that will compete a little better. So keep that in mind. But as always, bear in mind what exactly you're going to do with it. If you're shooting matches where you need to punch holes in 1/4 inch dots at 100 yards, then obviously sub MOA isn't going to cut it. You're going to really need half to 1/4 MOA. So think about that. Tom asks, John, what would your money no object rifle be? Tom, really, that's one of those academic exercises that I could go on and on forever. There's so many good rifles out there, and what I would probably end up doing is, instead of spending a whole lot of money on one rifle, I would break it down and I would buy several different rifles that are high-end rifles with that cash, and outfit them with scopes and slings and all these sorted other stuff. If I absolutely had to dial it down to one top-end rifle, then it would be hard to decide between something like the Accuracy International PSR, or Desert Tactical Arms SRS, or the Seiko M110, or just FM Ballista. There's so many of them out there that I've worked with that are great rifles that really I would love to own. So it's difficult to determine which one would be my one. Right now, for what I currently do, if I had to choose just one, it would probably be the AI PSR, because I can make it work for short action calibers, long action calibers. If I need to stretch out and start shooting targets at a mile, I can switch it over to 338 and do that. But you have the same functionality in the Desert Tactical Arms SRS as well. It's just a slightly different package, and it's a really innovative design. So it's a really difficult decision for me to make. If anybody wants to send me an unlimited budget so I can make that decision, we can do a whole separate video on that. So just keep that in mind. If you want to do that, let me know. We'll make that happen. Rice asks, high-end production rifle versus custom build. Well, that was actually a decision I had to make when I bought my Accuracy International AE Mark II. And in my opinion, what it really comes down to is, in a factory rifle, you're getting a rifle that you can service in your shop with off-the-shelf parts. You can just call the factory up. You can say, hey, I need this part, get it shipped to you, and install it. With a custom rifle, what you're really paying for is you're paying for all the parts that come off the shelf to be custom fitted together to work perfectly together. That is not to say that you can't have a custom rifle built with the ability to replace it with off-the-shelf parts, but I think you're losing a little bit of what makes a custom rifle a custom rifle. You could, for instance, call GA Precision and say, hey, I want a Remington 700 based rifle, have them true the action, screw a barrel onto it, drop it into an Accuracy International AX chassis, install your choice of trigger, and deliver it to you, and you'll have a very accurate custom rifle that you can replace parts. GA Precision will print your receiver and keep that on file, so if you need a replacement barrel, you can call them and they can spin up a barrel for that receiver, ship it to you, and then you can install it at home. But again, you still now have a bunch of parts that have been bolted together, and depending upon how you pick the parts out and what choices you made, you may or may not have a rifle that works very well together. Now, if you let the custom shop use all their expertise to put a rifle together for you, you're probably going to get a package that works very well together. But if you purchase a off-the-shelf factory rifle that's a top-end rifle, like a Sako or an AI, you have all of the R&D that the factory has put into that rifle at your fingertips. So you really have something that they spent a lot of time, a lot of money to hang their name and their reputation on in your hands. And that's basically what it came down to for me. I picked the AI because the reliability I've seen of them in matches and the ability for me to replace whatever I need to replace in the field should it break. The choice is yours based upon what you need the rifle to do and of course what your price range is, because if you can't afford say an Accuracy International if you can't afford an AI-AX, then you can build something on an AX chassis that is a little bit close to your price range in a custom rifle. So custom rifle gives you a lot of different options that you don't get in a factory system. Brian asks, if I have my HS Precision stock bedded before I have it milled out for a Badger bottom metal, will that affect the install of the bottom metal? No, Brian, it really won't affect the install of the bottom metal at all, because they're going to take that stock, they're going to chuck it in a jig, they're going to run it in a mill, and they're going to cut a pocket out for that bottom metal to fit in the stock, regardless of if it's bedded or if it's just the aluminum bedding block. The bit that's going to run through that isn't really going to care. However, I wouldn't waste the money on bedding the stock prior to having the bottom metal installed. I would go ahead and shoot it with the factory bedding block just the way it comes from the factory until you get ready to install that bottom metal, and then have the shop that installs the bottom metal bed it at the same time. You'll be out of the rifle for less time, and I think it will just give you an overall higher quality job. Michael asks, is it worth it to have Leupold switch my target turrets to M1, 2, or 3 turrets? Probably going to shoot some local matches. Is it best to have the turrets quarter, half, or 1 MOA? Well, Michael, I would not have Leupold switch your turrets over. I would just go ahead and sell your current scope as it is, and then I would purchase a scope that is better suited to shooting tactical matches. My recommendation would be a scope with a mil radian reticle and mil turrets, preferably graduated in 1/10 mil. That will give you an option that will better work together than still trying to run a mil reticle and MOA turrets. To answer the second part of your question, really, quarter MOA turrets have been the standard for quite some time in tactical rifle scopes until mil radian turrets started taking over the scene. Now most everything has switched to 1/10 mil turrets, and really I would suggest that for tactical rifle shooting. If you're stuck in the MOA turrets, then quarter or half MOA is the way to go. 1/8 MOA is really too fine for tactical shooting. You're really going to end up turning those turrets a considerable amount to get out to extended ranges, and 1 MOA is really too coarse to do the fine-tuned zeroing that you're going to need to do to get that rifle on, and then also to make long-range adjustments. So if you stick with MOA, quarter or half, really you'd be better off with a mil-mil setup in a different rifle scope. Ryan asks, how about glass quality versus magnification? Ryan, I really would almost always suggest a lower magnification, higher quality glass scope than a high magnification, low quality scope. You're just going to be able to see more when the mirage is kicking. It's going to look so much worse through that high magnification, milky, nasty glass than it is through a lower magnification, crystal clear lens. This is one of the reasons that I really suggest fixed 10 power scopes for new shooters on an extremely tight budget. You can get into the Bushnell 10X or the SWFA SS 10X for a very good price point, and then save your money for that higher magnification, high quality glass down the line. Craig asks, is dented brass a buffer weight issue? Well, Craig, it can be a buffer weight issue. It can also be an overgassing issue. Basically, what you're trying to fix is the speed with which that brass is coming out of the chamber. Anything that you can do to slow that bolt carrier group down is going to reduce the possibility of denting the shoulders of your brass on that shell deflector. Some alternate means I've seen guys do is stick some loop Velcro on the hinge of the case deflector wherever you see those brass marks starting, and that will save some wear and tear on your brass. Also, there are some brass catchers out there that you can set a little bit forward of that edge and you can catch the brass before it hits the shell deflector. In reality though, depending on how many times you're reloading that brass, it's probably not something I would worry about. With my AR10, some loads will give me some dings in the shoulders of the brass every now and again. I don't worry about it. I just go ahead and reload them and gas on. I'm not looking for razor's edge accuracy with the AR10. So if I'm not getting those rounds absolutely perfectly centered in the chamber when they're going in, then it's not going to kill me. I would much rather have the rifle function 100% of the time than work on retarding the gas system with an adjustable gas block or with a heavier weight buffer, and possibly introducing some malfunctions into the system. But there's nothing wrong if it's not a life or death situation. If this isn't a duty rifle, there's absolutely nothing wrong with experimenting with it. I would probably throw an adjustable gas block on there first and play with the gas pressures, and then go from there. Cody asks, what are the benefits of a suppressed rifle versus unsuppressed, and vice versa? Well, Cody, one of the big benefits of a suppressed rifle is obviously you have suppressed the report of the rifle, the muzzle blast. Reducing the muzzle blast reduces the recoil, and it also reduces that shock that you're getting coming out of the muzzle. Reduced recoil and reduced noise can help you prevent flinches. It can help get newer or smaller bodied shooters on the rifle and get them more effectively in a shorter amount of time. So suppressors are great tools for training new shooters. The drawbacks of suppressors in bolt action rifles are that you now have an added thing to worry about in the system. If you're installing or removing the system, you have to worry about point of impact shift. If you're removing and installing it often, you have to make sure that the suppressor's tight because they can work off as you're shooting. You get some thermal stresses in there where the barrel is expanding at different rates from the suppressors, and it can cause the system to loosen up if you don't really have it cranked on there. That's really about it for the bolt action rifles, other than increasing your overall length. On gas operated rifles, a suppressor will generally make the system run a whole lot dirtier than if you were running it on a bolt gun. The suppressor builds the pressure in the barrel and forces some of those spent gases back into the receiver. So you will have more fouling in the receiver and in the operating system. Overall though, the benefits of a suppressor I really think outweigh its drawbacks in most situations that you're going to be in. So if you have the ability to pick up a suppressor, I suggest you go for it. And the advantage of most suppressors is if you don't want it on the rifle for a specific circumstance, you can just simply remove the suppressor and run without. Well, that's all we have for this Mail Call Monday. Thank you very much for sending in your great questions. And again, thanks Wayne for sending in the shirt. We'll have more questions for you next week. And as always, please pay attention to our Facebook page because we will generally ask for question input on our Facebook page. So if you haven't liked us on Facebook, go ahead and kick over there and do that. If you have any questions or comments about this episode, please leave them in the comment section below or send them to us on Facebook or Twitter. If you're a subscriber, thank you. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. And YouTube won't send you a junk mail, but we'll let you know when we release new videos. Until next time, get out and shoot!